Hello, welcome to Reanimated. My name is Stuart. I'm in California. Joining me is H.A. Conrad, who is currently in, I want to say, Connecticut. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well played. Okay. Well, today we are going to be continuing our review series of Interview with the Vampire Season 2. In this case, it's episode 7 of Season 2, or 14, which was on the title card of the episode. I didn't realize until I watched this that maybe they've been keeping their episode numbers consistent from the beginning of the series.
Hmm, true.
So this one, before we get to the news, this episode is the big trial, and we'll, I'm sure, have some feedback and thoughts. Feedback, like anybody's listening to our feedback. Our thoughts on this
Hmm.
episode of the big trial. But before we get to it, we've got a few things in the news, which is encouraging. I'd rather there were things in the news than not. The first of them is a little bit difficult because it's about Last of Us Season 2, which is not coming until 2025, which still feels a little way off. And this was released in the sort of a sizzle reel that released on Max about what's coming up. And one of the things buried deep in there, like in the, I don't know, two-thirds of the way through, were a few seconds of Last of Us Season 2 footage. And so you saw it. Did you have feelings?
It's a very tiny, tiny snippet. It gets me excited. It gets me, it seems like it's pretty action packed. I don't know. I'm of course looking forward to it and I can't wait for it to come out. It just feels like it's going to be a really long time, a long wait for me.
Oh,
But,
for sure. One thing I would say that it does appear to show is a clicker attack on Jackson, which we don't get to see in the game. So
true.
clearly they are
But
making some, editorial choices, which is that's cool. I'm that makes me more excited because I'm like, oh, what are they possibly going to be doing here? We'll see where it goes.
right. And I did hear, and I'd have to confirm this, that the season two is going to be shorter. So maybe it's like a more compressed storyline. I'm not sure. And maybe that allows, you know, for like a pretty tight storytelling or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
So,
narratively there is less story in season two, in the second video
right.
game. That kind of makes sense. They don't go on like a continent spanning road slash walking trip. So I think you could do that and not lose too much of the content. Because just to without any spoilers, the second game tells the same story from two different perspectives, and so you're going back and forth. And I don't know if the show is going to take that choice. Like we might not, that might not be a choice that they choose.
Well, and the other thing is that I do think by keeping episodes or keeping them tight like that, it gives less of a, hopefully, um, less of an opportunity to have some of the pacing issues that we've seen in other series
Yeah.
where it feels like we're not really moving forward. So anyway, but it was nice to see Catherine O'Hara in this. She makes a pretty she's very front and center here.
Yeah, I'm not sure still what role she's playing because
Um
she almost looks like she would be playing a Maria character, but Maria was Rutina Wesley. So I'm not sure.
yeah, I don't know. So that's, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We will. We will. And right
But
before
I am
that,
excited.
in that reel was a teaser for a new Game of Thrones spinoff, which I don't remember if it was on the podcast or just me musing to you off the air about looking forward to more Game of Thrones content that could be White Walker related. This one doesn't necessarily look like it will be. There was
Mm,
zero White Walkers in that little couple seconds
yeah.
of footage, and it appears to be of the story of Sir Duncan the Tall, who's like a famous member of the King's Guard that they talk about in the Prime show.
Mm.
But I've been rewatching Game of Thrones just because I feel like I'm kind of in like a dearth of content phase.
Moment.
Yeah, so I've been rewatching Game of Thrones and I'd watched House of the Dragon and was really just enjoying that. I think I mentioned it last time we talked.
Yeah, and I still haven't watched it, but I know I need that's good for me because it means that I have
There
some
you go.
content to get through.
There you go.
Just hopping quickly back to the cast though of The Last of Us season two. I am very excited to see Jeffrey Wright, and I was hoping to see him in a little bit of the snippet, but I don't know that I caught him in there. Did you?
He's there. Yeah.
Very briefly.
It's a second. Yeah.
It's a second. Okay.
They're not
Because I
showing
was
us
looking
much of
for him,
anything.
but that
Um,
was it's such a quick little, tease, which is of
yeah.
course what it's
If
meant to
you go to
be.
minute one, second
He's
32,
there.
you
Okay.
can see him wearing his the
Mhm.
sweater that Isaac wears in the show, in the game,
Ah,
with a
that's
nice
exciting.
facial scar. Yeah, he's gonna be great.
Of
I got
course.
no doubt that he's gonna be awesome. All right. Well, anyway, so Last of Us season two, they're trying to get us pumped. I don't know when in 2025 it's coming out. There's a lot of that going around. That seems to be a thing people are doing, is not
Oh
telling
yeah.
me when stuff's coming out. But I
Well, they
guess
just
that's
don't
just
they don't
maybe
they don't they don't want to tell us.
no, because they're, who knows what could come up between now and then. The
Yeah.
second item in our list of news is pretty weird. It was in Bloody
Yeah.
Disgusting. However, it does feature Michael Biehn, but he also seems like a fish out of water for this project. But Michael
I
Biehn, we
don't know that
love.
he does. I don't know
Uh,
that he does. He's in a lot of these kinds of things.
Anytime
This
you've got a
is
token American in
it's
Australia,
him. It's him.
so
Or
this is a
something
movie.
like
It's a movie set in Australia. It's about a kangaroo, and Michael Biehn just happens to be there. Or maybe I'm sure they'll have some kind of good story reason for why he's there, being an American in the outback, who appears to be maybe a hunter or some sort of like wilderness man. But The Red is the name of this movie, and it's about a zombie kangaroo. And if I were to just say to you, H.A. Conrad, there's a movie about a zombie kangaroo, you'd be like, oh, a zombie comedy, I assume.
well, yeah, and I think that this kind of is tongue in cheek. When they
You
talked,
watch this trailer?
I did.
There is nothing funny in the trailer. It is all like, we're all gonna die. It's very serious.
Well, okay, so it's serious, but I mean, it's not serious. I mean, it's quite like hammy and silly in the same. I
I don't
mean,
know.
maybe
I didn't feel any of that. I just saw people looking like they were terrified and stressed out and scared. And
it's a
maybe
zombie kangaroo. The premise of it is hilarious.
I
Come
know,
on.
that's what I'm saying. The treatment is not doing that. It's something else. And they're none of those like dry one-liners that you might expect in a project from like a James Gunn writer of Slither or something like that. This seems like they're taking a different tack. Maybe it will be
Hmm.
funny, but the trailer was, this is a horror movie, and that actually got me more excited about it than if they were like, well, don't go through that door or something. You know, there was nothing
Dorky.
hokey about it. So I felt like that was actually encouraging.
Well, we shall see how it goes. I thought it was hilarious. So I can't say anything more than that, that I thought it was hilarious, even in the treatment that um, that it's in in whatever they're deciding to do with it. I don't know. But Michael Biehn, he's that like, quintessential horror dude. He I and there was a weird little moment. Did you see the thing with the stomach thing where I'm like, oh, are they referencing Alien there? So yeah. So we'll have to see what happens. I actually find, those really fit kangaroos kind of scary, and they are apparently pretty aggressive.
I mean, if
And
you go to a zoo and see some of the red kangaroos, those are the
yeah,
bigger
they're
ones.
scary.
They
Yeah,
could
yeah.
get really big, and I guess they can just eviscerate people in real
They
life.
drown other animals, and they're not very nice. So I don't think it's not like the warm and fuzzy kind of kangaroo thing.
And that might
Um,
be the tack they're taking for the whole movie. They might just be, this might be a PSA for everybody who thinks kangaroos are adorable, where Australians
maybe.
are like, no, they can be menaces. So
And it does have a Halloween
theatrical
release
release.
date, so there you go. And then I don't know. They did say like some of the things that they said were their influences. This is why I'm wondering if maybe we will get some of those little zippy one-liners because they were saying American Werewolf in London and like Jaws, though Jaws was not funny. So
Nope.
I
Other
don't know.
than we're gonna need a bigger boat is funny.
Or you're gonna need a bigger boat, but yes.
Okay. Jesus.
Can't mess that one up, Stuart. Come
I
on.
can. I do. I will.
There are some of those moments because it's Spielberg. Like there's like a couple, like the back and forth and the repartee is good. But anyway, we will see what happens with this. And I don't know if I would see it in the theaters, but I would imagine this is going to go into streaming pretty quickly. What do you think?
If not at the same time as its theatrical release.
Well, it's only be right now they only have an Australian theatrical release, so
Yeah.
that's the thing. Maybe it's released there and then
S-
streaming in every other
Stay
markets,
tuned
but
for a US release.
yes.
Yeah, weird. But welcome.
Yes, agree.
So then there was some other news that dropped a couple weeks ago while we were
On a hiatus.
having trouble logistical breaks.
Mm.
Um, and the title of this news is, you know what, Netflix go take a long walk off a short pier. I'm getting tired of Netflix canceling stuff, even if it was,
Mm.
the Zack Snyder Army of the Dead universe.
Well, you and I have talked a little bit about this. We did chat. Um, you know, we've talked about this just because it seemed like a lot of projects weren't moving forward or there weren't updates. They were just talking a lot about them.
Right.
And now, unfortunately, the reason for that, which I was worried about, is clear, which is that Netflix is canceling that whole franchise.
And some of this might be Zack Snyder's fault because
Yeah, it might be.
he is Mr. Overpromise, Underdeliver in a way.
He is.
And when he was given probably no PR minder to be like, don't sell this as a like an empire, but he couldn't help himself. Maybe I'm speculating, but
Well,
like
I mean, there could be
it's gonna
some.
be at least two movies and a prequel animated series and and we got two movies, but one of them had nothing to do with zombies, and the other one set up all this other stuff to come that we didn't get. So that was just it's disappointing.
Well, I have a theory that maybe this was also, you know, maybe his way of trying to get more more support for these projects. So he's out there trying to say, well, you can't take it back now, which of course they can, but I think it's successful it has been successful for other franchises. So I think maybe he was almost a fake it till you make it thing here, hoping that like there would be enough momentum and support and people would be like, yeah, cool. But the reception of the Rebel Moon thing and like that just I can understand why when they're looking at it at face. And also he's also very he seems to be spread very thin. And just didn't like there's only so much one person can do. But I also think that looking at their sort of the things that they are sort of putting backing behind, they want a sure thing, and sort of the numbers were not seeming to support this whole thing. So while Zach might have been really excited about this, and his wife might have been really excited about this, it didn't seem like everybody else was, except for us, of course. So yeah, so it's a bummer, but I have a feeling just the way that he is, I just feel like we may see this in another form or another place. I could see him just continue to shop it in other places once the option runs out, but we'll see. So it's totally a bummer, but what can you do?
And
It's
meanwhile,
it's
they've
what it
released
is.
two more Rebel Moon now director's cuts, which
Yeah.
I'm not gonna watch
No,
because the
no.
original movies were so bad. I don't think, although they look extremely different. Like there's whole characters that
Yeah.
I don't recognize if you watch the trailer. But I can't.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's gonna be different in a good way because I felt like he had total creative control of the first two movies.
Yeah. I don't know. He is just an unusual. This is kind of what he does, and again, like I have to hand it to anybody who's this focused on just kind of like pushing things forward, and I think that's how you do it. It seems to be a pretty cutthroat kind of world out there right now to get the funding to get the support of these projects. So anyway, well, I have a feeling that he's not going to give up on some of this, and we may see this down the line.
Yeah.
Um, and then for another long-awaited project, we are seeing a lot more about the Marvel Zombies. So
Not a
this
lot more, I
is,
would say. I mean, they
well, you
apparently
know,
showed some footage at D23, which I think is a Disney conference or convention.
it is, but
And
more so
all
than
they
we
really
had.
revealed was there's going to be 4 episodes in the run, and they revealed that Shang-Chi, Wenwu, who was his dad, and Katie, who was Aquafina in the movie, will be
Mm,
featured. We can add that to Kamala Khan, who we knew was going to be in it, and a handful of other
mm.
characters. I think we'd already heard Shang-Chi anyway, but still no release date. But it's coming out this year.
No, it seems to be a problem, doesn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, only 4 episodes, and they've been working on it for a while, and I don't really understand why they don't want to tell us when it's coming.
Well, I think there's probably some other red tape, especially with the content of it, and
There's
I
tons of
don't know.
MA stuff on Disney now on Disney Plus.
There is, but I just think this specifically because of the franchise, it's maybe giving them a little bit more trouble in terms of the packaging and making sure, like, I don't know that there's any way that you can insulate against the complaints that are bound to happen about this, but maybe they're trying, or maybe they're trying to do that ahead of time, or do sort of like exhaust every option in terms of how they might have to deal with some of that. That's just a opinion. It's just a theory, but I feel like they are ready for some kind of wild reaction.
Maybe that's
I
it.
don't know.
But yeah, I mean, nowadays when I go on Disney Plus, it's a wall of stuff that I could not play for my kids, especially if I mean
Mm,
their profiles are on, because they're younger, their profiles don't show them all of that, but uh it just feels like sure this might be the second Marvel show to have an MA rating because Echo also had one.
right.
Um, there's just because they've got all the ABC stuff and everything else there too. Yeah, I wish they would just hurry up and tell us when it's coming out. In part because we don't have a ton of content this year.
True.
And I hope they don't kick it to 2025, and then it's only going to be four episodes.
I think there's a possibility,
I
but let's
mean,
see what
seems
happens.
that way. And then finally, another trailer. Um, and this is on, want to say Scream Box, or no, it's coming in September to theaters and VOD. So we'll see where it gets released. But this is I will say the trailer was delightfully funny and has some interesting cameos. And this is a
Hmm.
movie called Zombie Wedding. Uh, So Sherry O'Terry of SNL fame is
Mm-hmm.
one of the cast members. I think she plays the mother of the bride, and she had some pretty funny bits in the trailer. And not Terry Gilliam, Seth Gilliam from Walking
Mm-hmm.
Dead, Father Gabriel himself, also playing a priest,
Yep.
but a
Again, it's like, man,
a very different kind of priest.
slightly different guy, but it's kind of funny that he's
Yeah,
doing that. Yeah.
this looked like it had a well-written, funny script. So the dialogue seemed funny in the trailer. I would say what they're going for in terms of the zombie makeup is something else altogether.
Oh, yeah, I don't know about it. I'm not loving it. Yeah, it's that genre of zombie film where it's like we're gonna just kind of overdo it in a
Mhm.
like over campy kind of way.
Yeah, like the
So,
zombies are all fully sentient and talking. They might be trying to
yeah.
kill the humans, but they're going to talk to them and be funny while they do it. So
Yep.
that
Yep.
will that will be remains to be seen how that comes across. And that's the last bit of news. Other than I don't know if you also saw that In the Flesh seasons 1 and 2 are now on Screenbox, and I think it was Bloody Disgusting or somebody was promoting it like, hey, you should watch this award-winning zombie show. And it made me nostalgic for when In the Flesh was in production because it was a good show and I felt like
It
it
was
didn't get to
such a
finish.
good show, and I
It,
wish it had had one more season, but what
yeah,
can you do?
they were so close to I feel like finishing their big story arc, meta
Yeah.
plot. Couldn't get
Oh
there.
well.
Um, and that brings us to the end of our news. And so we come to episode 7, season 2, Interview with the Vampire, entitled I Could Not Prevent It. written by uh freaking Wikipedia. Written by Kevin, Hannah, and Roland Jones, and directed by Emma Friedman, who was the director of the last episode we watched. And yeah, I feel like the same thing we keep saying is true of this episode too. It's slow.
It's slow, but there's a lot, and when it finally gets to the end of it, it's pretty intense. And I would
It's not that it's not impactful, but they dedicate an entire episode to this trial
trial.
play. And yeah, so I found myself sitting there watching it thinking, if I didn't know the plot, if I like putting myself in the position of an audience member at the Theater to Vampire when were doing this matinee, if I didn't know what's going on, I would find that play to be really boring. Like there's no story arc really. It's just a lot of monologues, even though there's like 20 people on the stage. I don't know. From that perspective, I found it kind of underwhelming that they're gonna do a play within a play, as in like this is an episode of TV about people putting on a play that's not really a play. Yeah, it just felt like the context was I get the context and it is like the performances that the actors are putting on have to be intense. Like that's what's supposed to carry it. But I just found myself thinking like, God, I would have walked out of this play if I was one of the audience
Mhm.
members.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the point is that they are controlling the audience members. And so even if they didn't think it was enjoyable, they probably they were all under mind control of the vampires in one way or another, right?
Yeah,
So,
from time to time, they make that very clear that that's what's happening. But yeah, I suppose so. So this is there's not a lot of Malloy, Louis, and Armand in Dubai. They go there every so often, but it starts with kind of like the immediate aftermath of them getting bagged and taken to the theater, or once they're at the theater, how they're basically tortured.
hmm
Like they feed Claudia to the
it's pretty,
rats.
pretty rough.
But
The rat
then
part
she's
is pretty rough.
recovered a fair amount by the time they're on stage at the trial.
Right. I mean, well, that's the whole deal is that like, you're recovered, but you're still in pain, right? So it's not it's definitely almost like oh yeah, you like even though you're an immortal, you can still be tortured, which is definitely what they do here, both physically and psychologically. And so there's the piece with the rats, which is incredibly horrible, not just for her, which is she has the worst of it, but a part of this is also Louis witnessing what's happening to her and also her witnessing what's happening to Madeleine. And so I think that there's like multiple levels of like pain being inflicted here. Um, and it's the slow burn part, and you know that like when he makes his appearance, when Lestat makes his appearance, um, is sort of like the fever pitch of this whole thing, where it's like, ah, now is all revealed. And so that I thought that they did a pretty good job at that. I'd agree with you that the play itself is kind of boring and that in and of itself isn't anything like some of the earlier things that they had been producing, but it's not meant to. It's sort of like this is a kangaroo court. Kangaroos are just all in our
Mm,
zeitgeist today. Um, but the I think the important thing in is, and this is revealed, later, just and it's almost an episode you want to go back and watch after you watch the end of the season, which I had already watched it before we made our decision to just talk about the one. Um, but because of your sort of idea of what's happening, and then later it's revealed that there's a lot of multi layers of things happening that you're not aware of at the first watching. So I do think that it's a pretty intense and interesting episode from that perspective, but it's not as action packed as other things have been. It's just a lot more about the dynamics between the sort of mob rule of the vampires, the whole involvement of Lestat now when it's revealed that he is involved in this, and the sense of betrayal that Louis feels, but not just betrayal in this moment. I mean, obviously, he feels betrayal from Armand. He feels betrayal from the fact that Lestat makes his appearance, and it's sort of like this person he thought he had been mourning, he had been haunted by, is back and has to be dealt with. And then obviously the complicated feelings about Claudia and some of the things that they're accusing him of in this particular venue and in this fake trial. Um, and some of the things that he presented to Daniel Malloy as he was telling the story about making Claudia and his viewpoint, and those things kind of get turned on their head. So that's kind of interesting. But they're not turned on their head in the moment, are they? They're turned on their head when he's in Dubai and re-examining it. That's kind of how I read it.
They basically
Um,
rewrite the entire first season, as far as I can
right,
tell,
right.
which
Yeah.
is it feels unfair to do that, to be like, oh, yeah, you like unreliable narrators? Well, everything you saw is now not maybe what it was. I felt a little bit like the rug was pulled out from under me with that,
Oh,
because I still don't necessarily believe Louis when he says, "Oh yeah, you know what? It probably happened the way he said it." 'Cause that's just a shitty thing to do in a
yeah.
story, I feel like. To be like, "Oh
Well, I
yeah, right, I was wrong," or I feel like you need to kind of do that rug pulling a little closer to the telling of the story. Otherwise, now I'm like compelled to go back and watch all of season one again.
well, I think that that's kind of the point.
No, I don't think that you want to do
And
that
I
as a show.
do. I don't know.
As a
I kind
show, I
of
feel like you make that reveal closer to the telling. That way, you you don't now the audience doesn't have to second guess themselves too. Their memory, their recollection of what was happening. That
but
just
then they
feels like
get
too much of a burden to put on your audience.
but that's kind of what the books do too. So there's a lot of that kind of reveal of although it's probably not done in quite the same way that they do here in that, but Louis, in terms of being an unreliable narrator, he and Lestat and their interaction, I guess it's more done in the fact that there's a lot more information that Lestat holds that and things that he protects Louis from during the course of their time together and especially the comparison, things like that,
We'll also
you
say
know,
that when Lestat begins his recollection, his testimony of how things went, he starts off with a bold-faced lie
yeah.
about how Louis hunted him,
Mm,
and which is
yeah,
uh,
that's true.
maybe I'm still just believing the original version of the story that I saw. But I felt like
Maybe.
it started with a lie, his testimony, and then it just kept going. And Louis was just like, I guess that's how it happened, you know? So yeah, now I just feel like, what can I believe? And I find that to be an unsatisfactory feeling for this story that I've invested many hours in, to not know how it actually went. So there's a
Eh,
lot of weird power in addition to this lie. Is it a lie? Is it the truth? Malarkey. There's a lot of weird power dynamics in this episode. You've got Santiago and the Coven. Santiago is now the leader of the Coven, he admits. Um, you've got Lestat, who is outside of the Coven, a respected figure, powerful in his own right, I assume, not as powerful maybe as Armand, but also unscriptable, as it turns out, during the course of this play. And you've got Armand is there, seemingly as a prisoner, and I don't know if I believe that at all.
no, I
Uh,
don't believe that. Not more for 1 second, which is why I was like, there is another shoe that will be dropping. And
okay.
I was correct.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know if you're referring to something that happens after this episode or his little mind trick that he does at the end of this episode.
No, it's mind trick, but also how powerful you know that he is. I
Right, but so
just
do
don't.
all of his ex-Coven buddies know how powerful he is. I just feel like it's crazy for them to even assume that they could lock him down,
Right. Yeah.
and that he would just submit to it. And so perhaps that's part of the revelation that will come later, is that he just didn't really want to save Claudia or Madeline, didn't care enough about them, and so
No, he did not.
he didn't. Um, and that, yeah, that's like another betrayal on another level, that he would let Louis believe that he was powerless to save them. And then there's the
But
audience in terms of the power dynamics. Just let me finish this little picture, and then
all right.
because so the audience has a say in how this is going because the vampires are eliciting guilty and not guilty and sentencing from them, but they're also manipulating them. Um, and anytime that Lestat goes off script, Santiago looks embarrassed and then is like trying to backpedal for him. And so almost in a way, the audience is yeah, is powerful in a way because Santiago is affected whenever the play doesn't go the way he's thinking it will. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
it's
true.
it's not like they have real power, I guess, because he could just kill them all, and that would be the end
Right.
of it. But for whatever reason, anytime Lestat says something that is not in the script, which happens several times in the course of this episode, Santiago gets flustered. And why would he be flustered if the audience didn't matter at all? I guess is kind of
True.
what. So those are the weird to me, like, and then there's the prisoners who have almost zero power, other than their ability to also impact the audience, which Claudia manages to do here and there. So there's
Right.
kind of some interesting power dynamics going on in this episode. That's the point I was trying to make. I did it very long-windedly, but sorry. What would you try?
Well, what I was going to say is that, the whole, not only is Armand, like, it's unbelievable that to me that he would be shackled in this way or have absolutely no power in this way. Um, but that Louis doesn't get that either. So he has two vampires on stage, Lestat and Armand, and he knows how powerful both of them are, or has at least some inkling. And so to sort of believe this at face, I mean, I think Claudia knows damn well that it's Armand, that has orchestrated all of this. And, that his jealousy of her and her dynamic with Louis, to me, evident that she sees that there's something else happening here. And that to me is very clear that she is not, she's eyes open and Louis is still a little bit in the dark, maybe deliberately so because he doesn't want to believe it of Armand, possibly.
Maybe he's just always
Um,
delusional, like with his
it might
revelation,
be.
with his him saying, "Oh, maybe it did happen that way." That's not a healthy thing to be
No,
like, "Oh, my memories have all been wrong. Darn it."
no, no.
But I will
So,
say Armand is doing a great job of acting in
oh
his role
yeah.
as a non-actor in this play or in
Mm-hmm.
the theater company, because he does look pathetic and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, fascinating. Uh, so we've got that's the kind of the scenery. Lestat does a very long testimony slash monologue that also includes him going down into the audience, making people cry,
Mm-hmm.
um, reading excerpts from Claudia's diaries. Usually that's Santiago, and they're using a lot of the projection on the
Mm-hmm.
screen to help tell the story. Um, they go into the story of Nikki a little bit, which also then you have like the homophobic slur come from the audience. And I did
Mm-hmm.
like this scene where Lestat just like appears there
Yep.
and then
That was kind of good.
eviscerates the guy with his words more than anything. Um, I thought that was a good scene.
Yeah, that was a great scene. And well written. And I also like just how terrifying he is. And I don't know. It was to me this was this you have a sense that Lestat does have some there is some conflict here in what is happening and there is some power in the mob rule. But again, also knowing how powerful Lestat is, um, it's also hard to believe like I guess I just don't believe that this would be happening if he wasn't allowing it to some extent. But maybe there's a lot more to this than we thought. And I do like how this like all folds out and how we look at this in a different way later in the story. I guess there's some level of penance that he has to do or punishment that he has to take because of the creation of Claudia. Even though it wasn't necessarily totally him leading the way on that front, but there's definitely more to this story than the face value of it. So I enjoy, like, look, Lestat is a really cool character. He's complicated, he is dynamic, and um I do think that no matter what, the other vampires in the coven are intimidated by him. And there's a lot more to him than we've been told, and this gets revealed a little later too, in terms of his maker, in terms of his strength. So
And he refers
it
to
is,
his maker's temper,
yep.
because during that's one of the longer off-script moments he takes is when
Mm-hmm.
he talks about dropping Louis 2 kilometers and why he did it, and that's not anything that Santiago wants to hear. He doesn't want to
Nope.
hear a lot about Lestat's culpability, other than the fact that he did make Claudia, but he did it under duress, yada
Mm-hmm.
yada, which again, I still don't necessarily believe that that's how that went. I know that Louis has turned around and said maybe it did.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he said that basically when Louis rejected him, he tried to kill him or he broke him. And that's a really affecting scene. Sam Reed is doing like some really great work here, and Jacob Anderson's just kind of staring at him from behind. I like the way that they had done the staging here with Lestat kind of
Yep.
sitting in an armchair in the front of the stage and the three prisoners out of his eye line, but always looking at him or at the audience and their expressions of kind of torture. And then Madeline's over there just mind-addled, staring
Mm-hmm.
staring blankly because Santiago has just been. I'm not sure why they did this. Um, and maybe this is something that also becomes clear in the next episode, but why the panel of judges keep doing like psychic attacks on Claudia and Louis, but they don't do that to Madeline. Madeline just gets whispered to by Santiago, and so she becomes like docile that way, and the other two have to be beaten.
Well, I think I mean, she's a newer vampire and just doesn't have the defenses that they do. She's also a much weaker vampire
Yes.
than
So
Claudia,
is it
and
is it that they could not be whispered to by Santiago and have that same effect? Maybe.
probably
Okay, maybe
that's what
that's
I think.
either way, anytime Claudia or Louis try to speak up or say, "No, that's not how it happened," they get stared at, and then there's like some weird wubs going on the screen to make you know that
Mm-hmm.
they're under attack, and they get
Yep.
nosebleeds. And they've also been hamstrung, or their Achilles tendons have been sliced through, so they cannot walk. None of them know how to fly, which is disappointing. So they're
Yeah.
stuck there for their trial, and every so often one of them falls down and is placed back in their seat, and the audience is all laughing at them and yelling. And it goes on for a good hour
Yeah.
of
So
my
that's a
time.
lot. It is definitely drawn out, possibly a little too much. I will give you that. But I do think that the point of it is to make it have that impact when some of the reveals happen in the last episode. So
Well,
I
that's
think that
not very
that's
that's not very that doesn't ease my conscience or make me feel better because I haven't seen the last episode.
Oh,
Uh
you haven't? Oh,
no, no.
sorry.
Um Yeah, so by the end of this, Lestat get like has gone off script and then got back on script, and then managed like gets the audience back under his spell, and they continue the trial, even though Claudia has managed to make them all shut up by calling it a stoning, which Louis
Hmm.
says that sucked all the fun out of the room, but they get things. They get the train back on the tracks, get to the end, get to the sentencing, and the admission of or the statement or what do they call that? The convictions.
Hmm.
And everybody's guilty, of course.
Of course.
And Madeline is given the choice to join the coven, which I thought was interesting, but chooses Claudia and says Claudia is my coven, which means that that's that for her. Claudia is also found guilty. So is Louis. They're both sentenced to death, but Louis, this is Armand's big trick, uh, makes the whole audience say banishment,
Right.
and so they cart him off into a coffin filled with rocks, which seems like a bad way to go too.
You also have a lot of, guilty looks from Lestat. and and definitely like he's going off script a lot, and most of those times that he goes off script are to apologize to Louis or to, sort of make his point to the audience, or I guess to the coven. It does show that they can't overpower whatever he is.
He's kind of a
And
force of chaos, and I think that was
yeah,
why he like that was always his thing. He was never the
yeah.
guy for rules. So yeah, sometimes he goes off script just to correct Santiago and be like, "I didn't point, I gestured," or like
Hmm.
I made a face. And Santiago is clearly, not cool with any of this, but just like he's kind of backpedaling for Lestat sometimes. He doesn't show any of his bad temper toward Lestat at any point. He needs him. Even though this is
Yeah.
all like with the funny thing about this, like doing this sham trial, this fake performance for a group of humans who are under their sway, like none of it matters. What's the point of any of it? If you're not trying to actually persuade anybody of anything, it's just a play for its own sake. You don't really
Yeah.
care about your audience. You don't what are you getting out of it as a Santiago? Other than you're getting to kill these people you want to kill, but you don't need all this ritual to do that. So it just feels arbitrary to me. After they take him off stage, then Santiago flies up to the ceiling and Armand kind of narrates this because Louis is like, "Well, I wasn't there, so you're gonna have to say what happened next." And
Right.
Armand in Dubai relates now that there's like a lens or something with some curtains because they're doing this and it's a matinee, so it's early afternoon.
Mm.
Opens it up and Madeline and Claudia cling to each other and basically dissolve. Madeline goes quite quickly. Claudia takes much longer and starts to sing that song from her play.
Yep.
I don't like windows when they're closed,
Yep.
but it's the effects are really good. And she goes out defiant, which is kind of what they're talking about in the after show. She will not take this lying down,
Nope.
and she bursts into those little into ash basically, and that's that. The audience seems shooketh, and they kind of filter out, and Santiago then comes down and picks up her yellow dress and takes it away, which we assume he's going to use it to torture Louis with later on.
But she's also torturing, Lestat because she's looking at him, and Lestat is watching as she dies. And
You got to think as
um,
as her maker, he must be feeling something through their link.
well, yes, and her defiance up until the end, and her defiance even when she says, there's like last requests and things like that, and even what she's saying to the audience, like, I'm gonna basically, if there's an afterlife, I'm gonna come back and get you, and even if there's not, I'll figure out a way to make you die. So that's kind of sobering. But her death is incredibly disturbing, moving, and she just doesn't let them take an inch from her. And I will say, in terms of an exit, it's incredibly powerful and horrible. And so it's interesting that they don't make Louis watch it, because you would think that they would have wanted to, given,
How much of just a cruel
yeah.
torture exercise this is? Yeah.
And since some of the banishment itself is meant to torture him, you would have thought that they would have forced him to watch it, but instead, it's recounted by Armand. That I think is interesting. And so he's buried in these rocks, and not able to move, and he's put into the crypt, even though they had made jokes about taking him to Belgium. To me, her exit is triumphant, despite the fact that it is horrible. She's not, but she's still herself, and she's still not, she does not surrender at any point. This is the, sort of culmination of what we've been waiting for. And to some extent, this is the elephant that has been in the room the entire time. And
Yeah.
so I think that that was an incredibly powerful exit for her, and also for the recounting, because it has to come from Armand. It doesn't come from Louis. So I thought that was interesting, that you're still taking this through the eyes of Armand, and not Louis. And I don't know. What did you think of Armand's reaction to telling this? Like he seems like, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell this," but then him watching and he's like, I could not prevent it." And you know,
Yeah.
there
It's
is
just the
there
title of the
is
episode.
right, right.
I don't think he has
Have
much
it
of a reaction. Like he kind of tells it. It's not like emotionless. It's sad. I think it's chagrin,
right.
but he's not telling it like, he's Armand is a pretty controlled, reserved guy. So his telling is yeah, it feels like he's saying the words with a thought for Louis's emotional state.
And look, there's the other piece with Claudia, which is, look, she was created as a way to sort of like fix a broken family, fix a broken relationship. She's always been caught in the middle of everything to do with Louis' relationships. For her exit in this way, she does not give an inch in terms of what the reality is. And she also does that a little earlier before they do the crazy mind control on her and whatever, because some of what they're being held to task is for their murder of Lestat, but he's obviously not murdered, and she calls that out.
But then they make
And
it about the murder of his other fledgling.
right, they do, but it's still, kind of she's just constantly fighting against
Yeah.
the sort of the what they say are their arbitrary rules. So again, I'm gonna miss this character because I think she's really just incredible, and if she has to go out, I guess this is the best possible way for her to go out. I also do like that they, and not shocking, but Madeline, especially given her betrayal by her neighbors and everything else that happened, and the solace she found in her relationship with Claudia, as short-lived as it is, that she wouldn't betray Claudia, I think is an important thing. That at least Claudia had one person or one vampire, I suppose, who didn't betray her, I think is an important thing. So at least that's a triumph to it, short-lived as it is, for both of them. But at least that is something that is not, she isn't betrayed by everybody. That is, I felt, a piece of this exit that makes it so difficult is that she finally has this person that valued her and valued her as a coven. So but anyway, I look forward to you watching the next episode so we can talk about it. Anything else to add?
No, well, yeah, I'm trying not to say it because I feel like it's too negative about this season. Just that they tried to make an entire season about this Paris Coven and the Theater of Vampires, and I don't think that they had enough content to do a whole season on it.
Hmm. I think they could have moved some things, agree. Um, and so we'll talk about it after you watch the next episode because I have some thoughts too that I think support what you're saying.
Well, in that case, we can wrap it up here. And if you have thoughts about this episode of The Great Trial, I could not prevent it. Let us know what they are. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And you can look at the rest of our episodes that are online at reanimated.podbean.com. So join us next time when we finish up season 2 of Interview with the Vampire.
Thanks everybody for listening and ciao.